Can we invite the next speaker, Mr. Nithi?
Dear friends and colleagues, even though I was identified as Director of NESA Communications, which is what I call my day job, I'm here in my capacity as President of the Environmental Protection Society of Malaysia, and we have been working towards mainstreaming sustainability since 1997 in two campaigns, one from 1997 to 2002. And subsequently from another campaign which started called Sustainable Living in Malaysia, and which we started in 2007, and that's ongoing, and we're having a major conference coming up in November. So so my presentation will be on a different track, and I think it sort of follows very nicely from the previous speaker. It's building integrity in social and environmental practices, and more looking at the critical need of why we need to have this. And of course, it's because of this beautiful object here, which is the Earth. So we do it because we have to protect the Earth. And of course, we all know the definition of sustainable development, which development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So we are looking at equity between current and future generations. Now, why is it so important to protect the Earth? There was a big, massive scientific meeting in 2012 in March, and this is the state of the planet. Carbon dioxide is up. There's because of coastal regions are dead. Temperatures of air and ocean are going up, and we know the impact of this. Sea ice, polar ice sheets, permafrost are melting with added impact on carbon dioxide emissions. Sea levels are rising, coastal communities are in threat. We have a climate refugee situation already for many years, and we are losing our biodiversity, our flora, fauna because of land use change and deforestation, and we're getting short of water. This is the situation we live in. So what's the goal? How does building integrity in environmental practices help? It helps us move towards the goal of living within the ecological limits of our planet. That's the goal we all want to achieve, living within our means. So we advocate the use of ecological footprint analysis as the means for measuring sustainable development. We can measure it to a very precise level. Using land as a measure, so the unit is global hectares. So using ecological footprint, which is a very definitive science, we actually, based on ecological footprint, today humanity uses the equivalent of 1.5 planets to provide the resources we use, and we absorb our waste. So we are living way beyond our needs, which also means that we are taken away from the future generations. We are consuming more water than we should, which means we're leaving the future generations with less water, less resources, a poorer quality of life, and this is grossly unfair. And so if we look at this statistic here from the Global Footprint Network, which does the measurements based on ecological footprint analysis, to have ecological sustainability, to balance the resources we have with the amount of waste we produce, based on the total amount of land we have in the planet and the prevailing technology, we all need to be, our ecological footprint must be 2.1 hectares or below, which is the second last bullet point. Whereas the current average, the world average is 2.7, which may not seem so bad, but yet when you look at it, you have a range of United States, Australia, Canada on more than 7 hectares, global hectares per person, and then you have on the tail end, you have people in the poorer countries like Bangladesh, Malawi, Mauritania, on about 0.6 hectares. So effectively, the people at the top end are consuming about 30 times more resources than people at the low end. So the question is, when you have a ship, the ship has a plimsoll line, and when you load the ship, you can't load it beyond the plimsoll line. The captain will say no, because it will sink. So if you overload the ship will sink. So why is it that we know enough not to load a ship beyond its cargo capacity, as indicated indicated by the plimsoll mark line, why do we think we can get away with overloading the earth? We think, we can do whatever we want. The harsh truth is we can't. And there's another issue as well as future generations, which is the intra-generational equity. We also have intergenerational equity, where we have some people living on 9 and 10 global hectares, and suffering from obesity and indigestion because they're consuming too much. Overeating, the analogy linked to eating. And then on the same side, you have a group of people who are starving, malnutrition, not enough food. So this is a grossly unfair state, and this is where we need to reduce the equity gap, both intra-generational equity and intergenerational equity. Now, how do we go about building integrity in environmental practices? And this is the strategies that we are advocating. So this is very much focused at the organization, so be it a corporation, be it a government, though most of our work is very much targeted at the government. The same principles apply to corporations. How do you go about building integrity in environmental practices? You have to have an institutional framework for mainstreaming sustainable development within your organization. The second thing, you have to rearrange your agencies, or if it's a corporation, your departments, to mainstream and implement sustainable development. So sometimes if your organization exists in a particular manner, that particular manner in which it exists may not help you towards implementing sustainable development, and you have to look at the way you may have to reorganize it. You may have to create a chief sustainability officer at the level of the CEO. So these are various things you need to look at. And the third thing is, of course, you need to have an external organization to monitor your implementation of sustainability. And I think the previous speaker alluded to some of these things. You have your environmental quality, your ISOs, you have your CDPs. So the important thing is someone else needs to look at you and audit you to see how you're doing. Now, in terms of implementation, you can do fantastic practices for others. Always start at home. And what do we advocate? Work on reducing your ecological footprint, which comprises three major elements. Your carbon footprint, which is the electricity you consume, as well as your fuel footprint. If you have a fleet of vehicles, you've got to monitor how much fuel they're using, because this is also linked to climate, and work towards reducing their footprint. Your water footprint, the new DG building has got rainwater harvesting. One of the projects we did in EPSM, we got some grants, and we actually we pitched for some grants from the Finnish embassy. We got the money, and we implemented a rainwater harvesting system in the Pure Life Society, where they have 140 residents. So we've actually implemented rainwater harvesting so that water, expensive treated water, is not being used to flush half a cup of urine. And the food footprint. Food is also a very critical component of the ecological footprint. So again, where does the food come from? How much food are we consuming? This is another issue which needs to be looked at. Just to mention that EPSM is currently on a major study to calculate the ecological footprint of Malaysian households. We've started this year and we'll carry on to next year. We've already collected data on 100 households, and the picture is not good. So even though Malaysia on average is 2.7 hectares, if you go anywhere, if you do an urban household survey, the footprint we found is a minimum of about 5 hectares. So it's double the national average. 5 hectares is almost like people living in just below Canada, like maybe Scandinavia. The urban Malaysians are having a footprint of the Scandinavians. And the reason we have 2.7 is because there are many people living in the rural areas of Malaysia who have a very low footprint, who are subsidized those of us who are townies, those of us who are living in the cities and the towns. And we've already collected 100 households, and we expect to collect about 500 to 1,000 households by the time we complete next year. So these are just what one needs to reduce your footprint, your energy, your transport. Now, one of the things, this is just a model which is very much targeted at the personal, at the individual, which can also be applied to the corporation. We started the SLIM challenge, and we have 10 indicators covering home, food, transport, personal, and office. And basically, the whole idea is if you take 3 of the 10, you're on the way towards leading a sustainable lifestyle. So what are some of these elements? for the whole, find ways to reduce my electricity use by 10% this year. This could easily apply to your organization. Find ways to reduce my water consumption by 10% this year. This could also easily apply to your organization. Reduce, reuse, repair, and recycle. DG is doing that. Start a compost scheme. Also practical at the office level, with the food waste which is happening, which comes out of your cafeterias. Food. Choose at least one day a month to eat a meat-free meal in my household. Which means that if you have an organization, you have a cafeteria, offer vegetarian options, basically because there is a direct link between meat consumption and ecological footprint. If you're on a vegetarian diet, your footprint is lower. If you're on a meat diet, your footprint is higher, and also it contributes towards greater greenhouse gas emissions. Transport. Maintain my car well, keep the tires properly inflated and abide by the speed limit. Not use my car for at least one day a month. This could apply to your fleet management. Personal, avoid unnecessary shopping. Critical towards reducing the ecological footprint is also sustainable consumption and production. And the message is very clear to try to move towards living within the ecological limits of one planet. We have to reduce our consumption. So while the Prime Minister will try to impress with how much GDP is going to be increasing in our budget on Friday, the critical solution is how much GDP can be reduced and yet enjoy the same quality of life. Politically suicidal, yet environmentally the only way to move forward. And say no to styrofoam boxes and plastic bags. Again, DG has a model with the cafeteria. And of course, at the office, think before I print. So just to highlight, we're having a forthcoming event, post-Rio +20, which is the major environmental summit on mainstreaming sustainable development. We are having this symposium on November 6th in University of Malaya, open to all at no cost. If you're interested in participating, there's an email address there. And here again, we're trying to push the agenda primarily aimed towards the government on mainstreaming sustainable development so that every decision the government makes, whether it's your EPP or your NKRA or your NKEA or all that effort to generate growth in Malaysia does not come at the expense of the environment. So with that, I thank you for your attention.